In the vast, frozen heart of northern Canada, where winter never loosens its grip, and the silence of the snow-covered wilderness feels as heavy as the ice itself, there lies a remote and eerily beautiful place known as Angikuni Lake. Tucked away between towering evergreens and boundless stretches of untouched snow, the lake was rarely spoken of outside the tight-lipped communities of indigenous Inuit tribes and wandering fur trappers. To the rest of the world, it was just another blank spot on the map, a forgotten region, drowned in white silence and bitter cold. But for those who knew it, Angikuni was whispered to be different, a place where the rules of nature didn't always apply. The year was 1930, and winter had wrapped its icy claws tighter than ever around the northern territories. Blizzards roared through the trees like ghosts howling from some other realm, and even the hardiest of trappers hesitated to stray too far from the familiar. One man, however, chose to brave the cold. Joe Labelle, a seasoned Canadian fur trapper who had made countless journeys through this unforgiving land. Labelle wasn't a man easily shaken. He had survived wolf attacks, blizzards, and weeks alone in the wilderness. But nothing, no beast, no storm, no starvation could have prepared him for what he was about to find at Angikuni Lake. Joe had been to the village before, a small Inuit settlement nestled near the lake's southern edge. It was a peaceful, tight-knit community known for its warm hospitality and simple way of life. He remembered their laughter, the smell of smoked fish drifting from the huts, and the way their sled dogs barked excitedly when visitors approached. But as he neared the village that day, the usual signs of life were gone. There was no smoke curling into the gray sky, no children playing near the trees, no barking, no voices. Just silence, thick, unnatural, and suffocating. Confused and increasingly uneasy, Joe stepped into the village. What he saw defied reason. The huts were intact. Doors swung loosely in the frigid wind, revealing interiors that were still in perfect order. Firewood was stacked neatly beside hearths. Bowls of stew sat half frozen on tables. Clothes were laid out beside sleeping mats, as if their owners had been preparing for bed. Tools, hunting gear, personal belongings, everything remained exactly where it should have been. Everything. Except the people. Not a single soul remained in the village. It was as though the entire population had vanished mid-step, without warning or struggle. Joe's breath caught in his throat. He checked hut after hut, calling out names he remembered, growing more desperate with every unanswered shout. Nothing. Not even a footprint in the fresh snow leading away from the village. Then came the dogs, tied. Up near the edge of the village were the sled dogs, loyal animals, vital to the survival of these remote communities. They were all dead. Starved to death, their bodies twisted in agony, eyes glassy with betrayal. No Inuit would ever abandon their dogs. It was not just cruel, it was unthinkable. Joe staggered back, horrified, the icy wind slicing into his face as he tried to make sense of what he was witnessing. And then came the graveyard. On the outskirts of the village stood a modest cemetery, partially concealed beneath a blanket of snow. Joe approached, hoping perhaps to find some clue, anything that could explain what had happened. But what he found there made his blood run cold. Several graves had been unearthed. The earth was disturbed, as if dug up recently, and the wooden coffins lay splintered and empty. Someone or something had exhumed the dead. Joe stood there frozen, heart pounding. The silence of the land was suddenly broken by an eerie, flickering glow in the sky. At first, he thought it was a reflection of the moon, but as he watched, he realized it was moving slowly, steadily, like a floating orb of pale blue light, drifting just above the treetops. It emitted no sound, only a ghostly illumination. And it passed overhead like an eye watching from the darkness. That was enough. With shaking hands and a heart full of dread, Joe turned and began the long trek south toward the nearest outpost of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. It took him several days, traveling through deep snow and battling wind that threatened to freeze him to death, but eventually he reached the outpost and collapsed into the warmth of civilization. What he told the officers sent a chill through the room. An entire village gone. No signs of violence. No tracks. Dead dogs. Empty graves. And a mysterious light in the sky. The Recemp took his claims seriously at first. A team of investigators set out for Angikuni Lake immediately. They, too, found the village. They, too, saw the emptiness. But when they returned, their official report stated that nothing unusual had been discovered. Worse, they denied the very existence of the village, claiming there were no records to support it had ever been there. Joe's credibility was questioned, his story dismissed as fantasy or hallucination brought on by isolation and extreme cold, but the story didn't disappear. Despite the official dismissal by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, whispers of the Angikuni mystery spread quickly, first among local trappers and Inuit communities, then across the territories, and finally into national newspapers. The Winnipeg Tribune and other regional outlets published unsettling accounts eerily similar to Joe Labelle's story. Headlines spoke of a village vanished without a trace and haunted northern wilderness. Witnesses were few, but the consistency in detail across multiple sources only deepened public fascination and fear. If Joe had fabricated the tale, he had somehow inspired others to do the same, or perhaps his truth was simply too disturbing for authorities to acknowledge. To those who believed him, the attempt to suppress the story only strengthened the sense of conspiracy. What could be so terrifying that officials would rather pretend it never happened? Speculation surged like wildfire. Some believed that the entire village had been abducted by extraterrestrial beings, drawn by the mysterious blue light Joe described. In the 1930s, the concept of alien visitors was barely a whisper in popular culture, yet the idea took root especially among those who had seen strange lights in the Arctic skies long before the word UFO had entered the lexicon. They recalled stories passed down through generations, tales of sky spirits, watchers, and unexplainable disappearances in the wilderness. Others leaned toward darker, earthbound explanations. Could the villagers have been victims of a mass psychosis? Had they wandered into the forest, possessed by a collective madness? Or had something ancient, something buried beneath the land for centuries, finally awoken and claimed them? Inuit mythology spoke of shadowy creatures, the Ajirak, beings who could take human form and lure travelers away into the wild. Perhaps the villagers had encountered one, or many among the more grounded theories. Some suggested that an epidemic had struck, possibly a fast-acting illness or toxic exposure that forced a sudden evacuation. But that theory collapsed under scrutiny. There were no signs of panic, no scattered belongings or rushed exits. Everything had been left behind in perfect order. Others argued it could have been an environmental disaster, like a sudden ice quake or thin ice leading to a mass drowning. But again, the lack of any tracks, damage, or bodies made these ideas improbable. There was even speculation of a military cover-up. Could the area have been used for secret testing? Had something gone horribly wrong, something the government wanted buried with the snow? Some fringe theorists believed Joe stumbled upon the aftermath of a classified experiment, and the village had been wiped out to hide the evidence. Joe Labelle, meanwhile, faded into obscurity. The public quickly grew divided. Some called him a liar, others a hero. Still others believed he had told the truth and was silenced for it. No further public statements were made by him, and he eventually disappeared from news reports altogether. But the legend he sparked continued to live on, growing more complex with each retelling. Years passed, and researchers, journalists, and amateur investigators attempted to trace the origins of the Angikuni people. They combed through Inuit oral histories, maps from the Hudson's Bay Company, and missionary journals, looking for any clue that such a village had existed. Some claimed to have found references to an unnamed settlement near the lake that had suddenly gone quiet in the early 1930s. Others insisted that the village was merely a phantom memory, an invented place anchored only by fear and folklore. But there were those who swore they had seen things. In 1953, a trapper named Emmett LaRoche claimed he passed near Angikuni Lake and saw strange tracks in the snow, massive impressions, not from man or beast, but something different. He followed them for several miles before they abruptly ended in the middle of a frozen clearing, as though whatever made them had vanished into thin air. That same night, he reported seeing blue lights in the sky, silently drifting above the trees. Emmett's story, though largely ignored at the time, mirrored Joe's too closely to dismiss. Inuit elders in nearby communities shared hushed stories of a cursed stretch of land near Angikuni. They warned their children not to travel near it, even in times of desperation. The stories always ended the same way: people go missing, and the snow swallows their tracks. Some claimed the spirits of the missing could still be heard crying out at night, voices carried on the wind like echoes of the lost. Skeptics continued to demand evidence: photographs, reports, bodies. But no conclusive proof ever surfaced. And perhaps that was the most chilling part, the utter absence of evidence. The perfection of the vanishing. No screams, no blood, no struggle, just a quiet erasure, like the land itself had reclaimed the people, sweeping them away in a single, silent breath. By the 1970s, the case had taken on mythic proportions. Horror. Novelists and paranormal researchers cited it as a rare and pure mystery, one untouched by commercialization or mass tourism. It was still too remote, too dangerous to real. You couldn't visit Angikuni Lake on a guided tour or take selfies where the village once stood. The wilderness kept its secrets, and few dared venture into it in search of answers. The RCMP continued to deny the existence of the case, maintaining that no official records supported the claims. But those denials only fed the legend. Old newspaper clippings resurfaced, hinting at contradictions in the official stance. Articles from the early 1930s detailed Joe Labelle's report in vivid language far too detailed and consistent to ignore. And then there were the anomalies: strange radio interference near the lake, unexplainable aircraft malfunctions, and weather shifts that didn't match meteorological models. Scientists brushed them off as coincidences or equipment errors. But for those who believed, these were signs that something about Angikuni was wrong, something beyond human understanding. In 1982, a Canadian documentarian named Laura Redfern tried to make a film about the disappearance. She and her crew made it as far as the outskirts of Angikuni before turning back. In interviews afterward, she described a growing sense of dread that overtook the entire team. It was like being watched, she said. Like the air was thicker. We heard things, voices, movement in the trees, but there was no one there. Laura never completed the documentary. She kept the footage, but most of it was unusable, plagued by static, distortions, and brief glimpses of strange shadows where no shadows should have been. She eventually abandoned the project entirely, claiming it had taken something from her. Time passed, and interest in the Angikuni mystery waxed and waned like the phases of the Arctic moon. Every decade or so, a new theory would emerge, reigniting public curiosity. Yet with each investigation, the trail grew colder, more uncertain, until The mystery became less of a question to be solved and more of a story to be feared. In 1991, a group of paranormal researchers from British Columbia undertook an expedition to the lake, aiming to uncover any trace of the missing villagers. They documented their journey thoroughly: journals, audio recordings, thermal imaging, and satellite positioning. For 2 weeks, they camped near the presumed site of the vanished settlement. The landscape was eerily undisturbed, as if nature itself had conspired to erase all memory of human presence. Still, they noted bizarre phenomena. Their GPS devices malfunctioned within a certain radius. Battery life in their cameras drained inexplicably. And at night, voices echoed across the ice, indistinct, childlike, and pleading. On the 13th night, their lead investigator, Dr. Malcolm Rayner, disappeared from his tent without a trace. His belongings were untouched, his journal left open, and his boots still inside the tent. The only clue was a single phrase hastily written in the notebook's margin: "It's under the ice." The rest of the team abandoned the mission and fled south in silence. When questioned, they gave little information, citing trauma and declining interviews. The footage they collected was quietly archived, never released publicly. Some say it was confiscated by Canadian intelligence. Others believe the team buried it to protect others from following the same path. By the early 2000s, the legend had reached global attention. Websites, podcasts, and conspiracy forums began dissecting the story, connecting it to other unexplained phenomena in the Arctic Circle: missing military patrols, distorted magnetic fields, even the Inuit tales of the Tornat spiritual guardians. Of the land that punished disrespect or intrusion. A few bold thinkers posited that Angikuni was a thin spot in reality, a place where the boundaries between dimensions fray like torn fabric. These ideas gained traction when satellite imagery from 2004 revealed a faint circular depression in the snow where the village was said to have once stood. It wasn't large, but it was symmetrical, unnatural, almost like a scar in the earth. Scientists labeled it a glacial formation. But for believers, it was the lingering imprint of something far more sinister. In 2013, a winter survivalist named Ryan Dell ventured to Angikuni Lake on his own, determined to document what so many had feared. He uploaded daily videos detailing the journey, the harsh conditions, and his thoughts. On day 5, things changed. His voice, once steady and confident, became nervous, paranoid. He claimed to hear music at night, a lullaby in a language he didn't recognize. On day 6, he stopped speaking directly to the camera. Instead, he filmed silently, panning over empty horizons and scanning the treetops. His final video ended abruptly with him turning the camera to his face, whispering, "I see them now. They don't blink." He was never seen again. Rescue teams found his tent and gear, but no sign of Ryan. His camera was recovered, its memory card intact, but with most of the footage corrupted except for that final chilling whisper. By this time, Angikuni had transcended folklore. It had become a symbol of loss, of fear, of the unknowable. And unlike so many urban legends, it had no cheerful skepticism, no jokes or debunking videos that ended with relief. Its horror lay in the possibility that it was real and that it could happen again, and yet the most disturbing developments were still to come. In 2021, a geophysicist named Dr. Helena Wexler led a government-funded research team to study unusual electromagnetic activity in the Northwest Territories. Though her assignment didn't specifically mention Angikuni Lake, it was within proximity. During their expedition, the team detected strange rhythmic pulses coming from beneath the permafrost, like a heartbeat, slow and steady, detectable only with sensitive instruments. Intrigued, they drilled core samples, and discovered a massive, hollow cavity deep beneath the ice, its formation inconsistent with known geological processes. While Helena theorized it could be a natural void, others in her team weren't so sure. The shape was too symmetrical, the surface too smooth, like something artificial. Within days, the team started experiencing psychological effects, hallucinations, nightmares, paranoia. One technician, normally rational and reserved, began screaming about faces in the snow and had to be restrained. The mission was cut short. The official explanation: adverse weather and equipment failure. But in leaked audio recordings, Helena was heard describing the location as alive, watching, waiting. Rumors soon swirled that the area had been restricted. No-fly zones were enforced. Military vehicles were spotted near the lake's edge. Government spokespeople gave vague responses, insisting there was no cause for alarm. But those who'd studied the Angikuni case for decades knew the signs. Something had been found, or awakened, back in the communities of the north. The elders grew quiet when asked about the lake. Some refused to speak its name. Others issued cryptic warnings to outsiders. The land remembers. It is not empty. It never was. Stranger still, in 2023, a weather anomaly was recorded near Angikuni, a localized snowstorm that appeared and vanished in a matter of minutes, visible only in satellite radar, but not detected by any station. On the ground, a photographer flying over the region later posted an image of the area, a spiral pattern etched faintly into the snow, too large to be made by human hands. No explanation followed. In the aftermath of the 2023 anomalies, journalists, researchers, and even a few thrill-seeking influencers tried to approach Angikuni once more. But access had become nearly impossible. Permits were denied without explanation. Locals warned against going, and weather conditions seemed unnaturally hostile near the lake's borders. Despite the resistance, a few succeeded in reaching the outer perimeter, only to return shaken, unable or unwilling to describe what they had seen. One man, a documentary filmmaker, reported, "An unnatural silence that presses against your chest and whispers beneath the ice that knew my name." He refused to publish the footage. Some things, he said in a rare interview, are not meant to be seen or shared. That place isn't just cursed. It's aware. Back in southern Canada, a group of folklore archivists assembled everything they could about the original 1930 incident. They cross-referenced Joe Labelle's account with newspaper clippings, oral traditions, RCMP records, and private letters written by missionaries who had worked in the region during that era. What they found deepened the mystery. Some of the earliest Inuit stories described a place in the north where the souls of the vanished walk on frozen water. These stories predated Labelle's journey by centuries. They told of travelers who disappeared near a lake, guarded by silent stars, and of spirits who take form when the moon bleeds silver. Even more chilling was the discovery of a 1912 journal entry from a French trapper who passed near Angikuni and wrote, "I felt watched by something older than man, something waiting below." By 2025, the mystery had become legend, but a dangerous one. The more people learned about Angikuni, the more drawn they were to it. Online forums turned into communities of obsession, with users sharing coordinates, decrypted symbols found in ice formations, and theories involving ancient beings, alien abduction, or even time slips. Some believed the entire village had been pulled into another dimension, a reverse birth, into a frozen purgatory. A few fanatics attempted to reach the lake, to join the missing. Their stories ended in silence. Search parties recovered. No bodies. Only their last text messages remained frantic, incoherent, and echoing the same motif. They're here, under the snow, reaching up. the Canadian government continued to deny any unusual activity. But leaked internal documents revealed something startling. Angikuni Lake had been listed in a 1976 confidential report as a zone of interest. Class C phenomena persistent and unresolved. The document referenced electromagnetic disturbances, human disappearances, and psychological instability among nearby inhabitants. It even suggested that similar zones existed in other remote areas of the Arctic. Though none as active or dangerous as Angikuni.as, the world advanced and attention shifted to digital fears and global crises. The story of the lake began to fade again, retreating into the shadows from which it came. But those who lived closest to it never forgot. They knew better than to dismiss the warnings. They remembered the graves, the dogs, the food left cooking, the whispers, and they remembered the light, the same pale blue glow Joe Labelle described. In 1930, returned one final time in the winter of 2024. Seen by 3 different aircraft pilots flying over northern Canada, it hovered for just under 2 minutes over the coordinates believed to be the center of the vanished village. No weather balloon or drone was detected. NORAD issued a brief statement calling it a weather-related optical illusion, but those who had followed the story knew better. The light was real. The watchers were still there. The silence was not empty, it was a warning. Now, nearly a century since the first report, the Angikuni disappearance remains unsolved, untouched by time, immune to logic. It is the ultimate enigma, part myth, part memory, part fear. A question that gnaws at the edge of understanding. How can an entire village vanish without leaving a single trace? Some say the village never existed. Others say it still does, just not here. Perhaps it slipped into a fold in reality. Perhaps it was claimed by something beneath the ice. Perhaps the villagers are still alive, in a place we cannot reach, crying out through static and dreams. Whatever the truth may be, the lake remembers, and sometimes, if you stand very still on its frozen shore, you'll hear faint footsteps, walking in circles, just out of sight.